In this episode of Me and My AI, I'm going to interview John Macfadyen, founding partner of Agile Center in England. We're going to talk about how he's trained his personal AI on all of his courses and writing so that individuals and teams all over the world can learn how to leverage Agile and Scrum methodologies. If you're a thought leader, stick around to see how you can use AI to ensure your voice, your past content, and all of your courses and training materials can live on and help people around the world through real-time conversations with your own privately trained personal AI.
As we all do as professionals, at times we end up on the wrong foot and we have to come up with something. And what I'm grateful for is that a lot of what I can fall back on is actually very germane to what I do for a living now.
Welcome back to Me and My AI. In this interview series, you'll meet leaders and business owners who have trained their own personal AI to support their thought leadership and their impact within their communities and their industries. I'm your host, Marissa Brassfield, and you can chat with my AI at marissa.personal.ai. Today, we're going to cross the pond from California to England. It's my pleasure to welcome another early personal AI customer, John Macfadyen, the founding partner of Agile Center. John, welcome. It's so nice to be with you today.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, what a privilege. I cannot, after a little bit of lurking, I need to go to your part of the world. It looks so beautiful.
Some days are better.
Well, I'd love if you can kick off and just tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into teaching executives and teams about Agile and Scrum techniques.
Okay, so 2 decades ago now, it's worrying when I say that, but it is the truth. I was a software developer working on systems that couldn't go wrong. People's lives depended on them. And at that time in the software world, it was all tested through a front end, which is great. My system didn't have a front end, which was a problem. So we went out and we can't have this. So we went out, we came across this idea called test-driven development, which is a way of designing software, but it also means you write a little test and you know whether or not the software works before you've written the code. So we knew that our code was good, functionally did what we wanted it to do. Now, TDD is part of extreme programming, which is one of the early agile frameworks. So as a team, we went, this works really well, let's give it a go. And we built some really very good extreme programming teams. But we weren't too good at the customer, I'll be honest. We were the stereotypical techie people with very introverted, headphones on, heads down coding. And we thought that's not a good idea. So looking around, we came across Scrum. And in that was this idea of a product owner, somebody to go out and talk to customers. That's how we viewed it anyway. Somebody to go out, get what they need and bring it back to us. And we built, in hindsight, not a great Scrum implementation, but much, much better than what we had. So that really kicked off. And my role became Scrum Master. So I was somebody who was, instead of being responsible for solving technical problems, suddenly had all the people side of it. And as you could probably guess, my background is very engineering and maths, and people problems were not on my radar at all. But for whatever reason, my brain loves them. And that meant that I really dug into that area. So I really resonated in Scrum Mastery. So working with one team, then a few teams, then small organizations. And over the years, I've had the dubious pleasure of leading some of the largest Agile adoptions in the world. So I spent 2 years with Deutsche Telekom as one of their leading coaches for their product development division. So thousands of engineers around the world trying to adopt Agile in a very typical telco. From there, I jumped over to Aviva and joined them for a year to help them with their global adoption before joining McKinsey and Company, and joined there as one of their global leaders in Agile. 2 years. Most people know McKinsey these days, for good or bad, flying around the world, meeting lots of great leaders of some of the biggest organizations in the world. And for me, that was fantastic because that was what I was looking for from joining them, was really getting into the boardrooms, talking about Agile, Scrum, agility, how to make these huge organizations responsive in the 21st century. So that was for a few years, and then I quite like seeing my wife and kids, so I should probably stay at home more. And so that's what I did. Today, I spend my time reasonably evenly between coaching leaders, scrum masters, product owners on implementing Scrum and Agile. So getting this working and leading courses. And so foundational through to advanced courses on just getting people the knowledge, the understanding of what makes this work. So that's really how I found myself here today. I would love to say it was deliberate, but I thought I was going to be an electronics engineer.
I always get so fascinated, and thank you, by the way. I get so fascinated hearing people's origin stories because it's true, it's a journey and it's not necessarily linear or predictable, especially now. And I imagine that your training in Agile helped you adapt professionally and personally to all the changes that you've seen in the technology landscape over the last couple decades.
Yeah, sort of chicken and egg, really. The pace of change in technology is so fast that you deal with change. In fact, one of the reasons I stopped being a developer was I couldn't keep up with it. I recognized when we had our first child that the hours that you put in outside of work to keep pace, um, I didn't want to do. I'll be honest. That's really what it came down to. I thought, I've got a baby at home, I can go play with them, or I can code until midnight, 2 in the morning. And I made my decision. I'm quite happy with that. So you're kind of used to it if you come in from a software space. This changes constantly. I think this is part of the reason that Agile has flourished so well in the software world is because there's a real symbiosis. It comes from the software world, but it works because the pace of change has not slowed down in the remotest. But it means that I've got solid experience to fall back on. Because you know, as we all do as professionals, at times we end up on the wrong foot and we have to come up with something. And what I'm grateful for is that a lot of what I can fall back on is actually very germane to what I do for a living now. So if somebody asks me, I can probably pull out a story from 20 years ago of something similar. It may not be the same. It may not be. I've had to talk about delivering software in board meetings before, and you see them look a little bit puzzled, but they get the point. And it's because I've forgotten what I was meant to say. Um, so I think it's kind of one of those. Yes, it definitely helps. Um, but I also think the career, as you alluded to, most people's careers are transitioning so quickly now. I think everybody's well, they're either used to it and accepting of it, or they're really struggling with the world today.
You said it. And it is that comfort with change. And interesting, I love that you brought up the birth of your child. So I had our son in 2020 and similar shift happened. Oh, I can keep working or I can play with my little child who is just so new to the world. It was such a clear distinction. But even that transition can really throw people for a loop. So let's transition to personal AI. You are one of the very early users of personal AI, and I'd love to know how you discovered it and what made you curious about training your own private AI model.
I think how I discovered it, I wish was some interesting thing, but genuinely Google. Um, I was, I'm always fascinated by technology. I am the shiny collector as it comes. Now, I want to play with new tools. I was looking around, and AI, and this is before the rise of chat GPTs and things, this new field, I've been dipping in and out of, and I wasn't particularly impressed, if I'm honest. I was like, okay, it wasn't AI, it was more, I'm giving you a whole vast load of data and you're parroting it back at me in a semi intelligent form. And yeah, I can do that myself. Personal AI, when I came across it, I really like the idea of a small language. It was the only one, or at least it's the only one that stands out in my mind at the time, that wasn't about trawling the internet for an answer. It wanted your answer, and it will act as a repository for your experiences. That when you ask it a question, you'll get your answer back. So, what really interested me was exactly that. What captured me was this idea that you can start teaching it what you do for a living. And I had loads of ideas at the start, and some of them have worked and some of them haven't, as always when you adopt these things. But one thing that has been a thread throughout has been the idea of scaling me. As horrible as some people may find the idea of more Johns in the world. But there's a real problem in the agile world. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of nonsense out there written by people who I would say should know better, but probably don't. Um, they've seen a bandwagon, they've jumped on it, and they've got marketing abilities that most people in the agile world don't. We're not the best at that sort of thing as a whole. Some people brilliant at it. Most of us are developers. And really, it was a case of how do I reach people when there's only me? And personal AI, I saw as well. Actually, this is it. Once we've got it trained and it's talking in a semi-coherent function, which has taken longer than I thought, but I'll take the blame for that. We can get it talking to people, and because we're now talking about computers and servers, scaling isn't an issue. That's a money problem. Which is it's not even a big money problem anymore. So how do we get there? How do we teach the foundations? How do we debunk the myths? How do we stop hearing people talk about their awful experiences of Agile and Scrum, when in truth they're not talking about Agile and Scrum, they're talking about a thing people have used our language on their bad ideas. So that was the thing that hooked me, was this idea of actually I can create an AI that can talk about Agile, it can talk about Scrum from the foundations up. It can be a bit of a research assistant with me because it can take my notes and it can remind me of stuff that I've pulled out of books and articles and all the stuff that you do as part of your professional life. And it will remember stuff that I won't. So when I ask it a question, it will spit something back that is what I think, but enhanced because it's remembering things that I don't, or remembering things more correctly than I do, as may be the case. So, yeah, it started off as I want to play with a new shiny toy, but it very quickly morphed into this could be a very real aid in what I want to do in the world, which is help people understand this agile stuff. Really, is help people operate in an incredibly uncertain, volatile world.
It's beautifully said, and I'm nodding so hard because so much of what you shared, it also drew me to become part of the platform and start putting my information in and begin training just to be able to reach more people in more places and to be able to access that historical information. And maybe these days I'm talking more about artificial intelligence, but 5 or 6 years ago I was really interested in these other elements, and to be able to explore even my own mind and my thought leadership through a historical perspective with my AI has been so valuable. Now, I'd love to hear more about how you trained your AI. You mentioned you've got courses, you've got a wide body of material that you brought in. What are some of the data points that you use to train your AI?
So a big one are the courses. So for quite a while, I personal AI used to have a brilliant thing. It's taken it away at the moment, and I'm going to keep petitioning for it to come back. But the voice capture side. So a lot of my work is talking. So I would be here presenting a class online, and I had a separate machine coded to my voice, so it didn't pick anybody else up. And it was just transcribing everything I said. Um, so I mean, when you're delivering for 8 hours, okay, you're not talking non-stop for 8 hours, but that's a lot of data. I get very passionate about my job. I am one of those people. If you ask the right question, I will go for as long as you will let me, which is brilliant because in my courses they don't get a say, um, but they do. I do pay attention, but I had this second laptop just sat there recording everything that came up in a course. And I genuinely couldn't tell you after a course exactly which additional topics beyond the foundation of the course I delivered. but it remembered. So doing that, and you deliver the same course many times over 18 months. So it's learning how that course is evolving. But there's also actually around the same time, I'm trying to think. So maybe 6 months before, I started recording videos for YouTube. So very much in the same vein, this idea that answer questions to help people who are going into interviews or just have questions. So what I've been doing also, originally it was put those through transcription and then upload them. Now the YouTube clip goes straight in there and it does it all itself. It's brilliant. You know, articles, documents that I've written, articles that I've read. And one of the things that I really like is the sub personas. So, I can have all the agile stuff in one persona and you can talk to that, where I can actually capture other people's content. So the videos that resonate with me, the other articles that I've read that aren't mine, and I don't want to necessarily give you access to those because it may come across as mine, but additional stuff that would be really useful for me to remember. So that primary AI knows about it all, but then I can extend access to a sub persona just about agile.
So, John, you said something that I just want to double click on. So, you are using your sub personas to catalog and log information that doesn't necessarily represent your thoughts and your memories, but it's things that you want to be able to recall later on. And so, it might be information from other folks, and you just want to be able to access and retrieve that. Can you tell us more?
So yeah, the sub personas are really interesting. When they came along, for me, it was a huge. Yeah, I get it. I get where personal AI is going. I've got the primary AI which I access and I don't particularly share with anybody else because what it means is that I can have, as my life has, different aspects. So I've got one that is about my company, and if I can't remember things like my tax number, really exciting stuff goes in there. But running a company requires stuff that I don't want to give you access to. Um, but for me, it's great because I don't have to go hunting through things. What did I say about this? What's the proposal on that? What on earth did I do with that pricing sheet? I can just go and ask my AI and it can tell me. But the ones that I find even more useful are the ones that, so all of the stuff Agile goes into a sub persona called Agile because I'm good with naming conventions. But other people's content. So I have one called Other Content, and that is simply when I'm reading the web or you know watching TED talks or good old YouTube or whatever, and I think I want to remember that's important. I want to keep that. I just put the link in there. So just upload the URL, let it go through it. Now, the reason that I don't want it shared through um, the agile one is because I don't want people to think it's my thinking. If I'm going to use it, I'm going to cite it. I'm going to say, it's this great book by such and such or whatever. I want to be honest because they've worked hard for what they've done. They're sharing it. It's just wrong. So for me, the sub persona is really good. What it means is I can work with that body of knowledge that I've picked up, some of which I've forgotten. But over time, you're pulling these things together so that today I've been talking to it because I've been writing articles and building a course about facilitation for Scrum Masters. Um, and there's stuff in there from a few months ago, and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I should definitely use that. And it's stuff that I know, but I may not know I know. And when you sit down in content creation, be it blog posts or courses or whatever, it's become such a valuable resource that I can capture other things. I've got things for other aspects. I'm playing around with the sort of intersection of the agile world and stoicism at the moment. So I've put one in there that was called Stoic Agile, where I'm loading up things about stoicism. Um, so that when I talk to my main AI, I can start saying, well, what do you think about the intersection between these two ideas? How does this work? How does that play together? Um, and what is brilliant about it is completely separate to the sub personas. But what is brilliant is suddenly I'm having a conversation with a slightly smarter version of myself because it remembers everything. And it's saying, well, actually, there's this link and that link. And I can ignore stuff and I can edit stuff and fix it when it gets it wrong. But actually, it's pulling out things that have got me going, oh, I thought of it that way. Okay, well, let's explore that tangent. And very often, what I have to do is then go and read some more stuff and what have you. But the interesting stuff goes in. So every time, every day, you know, this model is getting richer, the answers are getting more refined, but throughout it all is my voice. And what the sub personas have done is mean that I can really divide up these different aspects of my life. So I've got other things, sort of personal life, that have some quite dense, boring legal stuff that, I'll be honest, I don't want to remember. So I've told it. And I've said, here you go, for this, have the boring legal stuff. And I'll ask you when I need it. Um, it will just spit back. You need to think about, these are the responsibilities of a trustee. This is what you need to be doing. This is the chair of this board. Okay, yeah, I should probably do that. And the sub personas mean that I can have that quite neatly sectioned up. I can give people access to the stuff that it's been created for to share publicly, but actually I can also use it for the other areas, both professional and personal, that make my life easier. So it is morphing slowly, but it is morphing from being a professional tool, a professional assistant, to more of a personal assistant, a proper PA, a more rounded your life assistant, because it can remember stuff. At some point, I want to tell it about all the important people in my life and the key dates, because I am terrible. And I know my wife's brilliant at it. I shouldn't rely on my wife. I know I'm going to forget. So why not have something in my pocket that knows for me and can hopefully, fingers crossed, tell me before I get in trouble for forgetting something? You know, alongside it saying, for me in the future, what I'd really love is to have something that's out there scanning the internet, going, you were really interested in this aspect of Stoicism, and such has just written an article, or there's been a new paper released that looks on the psychology of this thing, and it can bring it to me, which would be amazing because it knows what my interests are. It's grown with me. I think I think many people do. Is my interest bounce all over the place. Um, but I'm really excited when I'm brought back to something because I'm like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed this. I can start. And where I want it to go is then actually being able to say, you know what, go find me content. Go find me the stuff that you think the little the little me in a box, I suppose, think would be interesting to me, the actual person, so that I can read it, synthesize it, and we can have a chat about it. As I can count on, well, actually, I don't need any hands at all for things like the intersection of Stoic and Agile as to how many people in my life I can talk to. Um, because most people just look at me and go, what? But for me, it's a very real, interesting thing. It's a rabbit hole I'm diving down quite deeply at the moment. And maybe there are people out there, but in my immediate sphere, they just think I'm a bit mad. Um, so I might be a bit mad, but at least I can talk to a computer and be a bit mad with that.
We're all mad around here. Beautiful. Well, I love how you shared the present and the future of how you're using your personal AI. And it's exciting because if you all had who are listening, if you head to john.personal.ai, you'll be able to interact with John's AI right now. And as the second part of this interview, I'll be interviewing your AI. And I am so excited to dive into the concepts of stoicism and as it relates to lean technology or methodologies and techniques. And I really love how you have brought in those elements of your personal interests and the resources that are so fascinating to you, and that you're also using those to train your AI. So I love even just how much I've learned about the different ways I can customize my AI just through this interview. John, any final words for those who are listening? They're interested in Agile, they're interested in Scrum, and they're also interested in asking their questions. What kinds of experiences can people have when they visit john.personal.ai and they start interviewing and exploring and chatting with your AI?
When you get talking to my AI, asking questions about Agile, anything you want, anything you can think of, because either the answer's in there, or, and this is a bit selfish, it's going to give me somewhere that I can recognize as a gap and go and fill in the gaps, because this is a constantly evolving learning model. You know, any professional has such a big field that as soon as you try, you just realize quite how vast it is. Um, and what I'm really looking forward to is people asking it whatever matters to them, as long as it's within the world of Scrum and Agile, because that'll be really interesting to see where people's thinking is, how it's evolved over time. And if it doesn't give you an answer, I will absolutely be on the other side of it, going, oh, actually, I'm creating the answers for it and getting it out.
Beautiful. John, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom today. I'm so excited to get to know your AI better, as well as you. So thank you so much for your time, and see you soon. Hey, it's Marissa. If you want to see me interact with John's AI, check the description below this video for part 2 of our interview. See you there.